So two major cases challenging rifle bans and magazine bans are sitting in front of the Supreme Court right now. And now we have a new development on today's order list. These two cases were not denied, but instead they're likely going to be relisted once again. And also, most importantly, we also received a brand new Second Amendment ruling that struck down DC's magazine ban, which may also be something that the Supreme Court wants to consider before deciding what they want to do with these two cases. So let's break down what is happening, because there may be more going on here than just, routine relists. Again, they may be taking into consideration this new ruling. Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. You can also click the like button. That just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this content, and so it shares it to more people. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to expand upon their benefits to give you as much as possible as a member. They included things like red flag law coverage, civil liability coverage. They're guaranteeing 4 attorneys to your self-defense case. So if you're interested in something like that, you can check them out using the links down below. And if you use my code ARMEDSCHOLAR, you can get $25 off of your sign-up fee. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you will know that the Supreme Court has been avoiding rifle and magazine ban cases for years. But the core constitutional question that they need to address is very simple. Does the Second Amendment protect common semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s and also standard capacity magazines? Lower courts are deeply divided on this very issue and question. Some courts say that these are protected arms, and others say that they are too militaristic in nature, that they are useful military service and therefore can be banned. Some courts even say that they can be banned despite the fact that they also find that they are protected arms. And that confusion is exactly what these cases are asking for the Supreme Court to address. Recently, multiple rifle and magazine ban cases were sent to the Supreme Court at the very same time, and they went to the same conference. But on this week's order list, those cases were not denied, but they were also not granted review. They're likely going to be relisted. So instead, they're just going to be relisted again. So we need to talk about what that may signal, especially in light of a new magazine ban decision that we received last week. Now, the first key case that we're going to talk about is Vermontes versus Cook County. That is the major case in front of the Supreme Court dealing with Cook County's ban on so-called assault weapons, which includes things like just simple AR-15s and other types of semi-automatic rifles. The plaintiffs in this case argue that these rifles are in common use and therefore are protected under Heller and Bruin. They're asking for the Supreme Court here to finally say once and for all that essentially states, cities, counties, and these localities cannot just simply ban an entire class of commonly owned firearms. The second key case is Duncan versus Bonta. Now that case comes out of California dealing with California's magazine ban. You may remember that that case was already previously granted, vacated, and remanded by the Supreme Court after they issued their Bruin ruling. But now this case is back in front of the Supreme Court once again because the Ninth Circuit continues to uphold this magazine ban and not faithfully apply that Bruin analysis. Now here's where things are getting very interesting. Just recently, last week, we talked about a new decision that came out in a case called Benson versus the United States, and that came out of Washington, D.C. In that case, the District of Columbia Court of Appeals struck down D.C.'s ban on magazines holding more than 10 rounds. The court there in that case held that these magazines are protected arms under the Second Amendment and that they are in common use and that they're widespread, not just in the jurisdiction, but also, across the nation, and that there is no historical tradition of banning arms commonly possessed by law-abiding citizens. Because of that, the court ruled that the ban was unconstitutional and reversed the convictions that were based on that law. Now, normally a ruling and decision out of the DC Court of Appeals, which is, kind of a state equivalent of a Supreme Court for DC, that would not automatically change what the Supreme Court wants to do in this issue. But it does add another voice to the growing disagreement among courts about magazine bans. And that may be something that the Supreme Court wants to take into account as it considers cases like Duncan and Vermontes. Now, like I mentioned, both the Vermontes and Duncan case have been relisted once again instead of being denied, so at least they were not denied. That means that the Supreme Court justices are actively going to be discussing, behind closed doors once again, what they want to do with these cases. Recently, the court has been relisting these cases while multiple other rifle and magazine ban cases are also arriving at the Supreme Court at the same time. And that kind of creates something we really haven't seen a lot, where you have multiple cases addressing the same constitutional question landing in front of the Supreme Court all at once and be considered all at once. And now on top of that, we also just got the Benson ruling striking down a magazine ban, which could be another factor that the Supreme Court justices are going to consider. This may also lead the Supreme Court to want to see how the lower courts respond to that new ruling and how other pending cases also develop. This situation may actually be exactly what the Supreme Court justices have been waiting for a long time. Instead of taking one isolated case from one state, the court can look at multiple bans, multiple circuits, multiple conflicting rulings all at once, and that allows the court to resolve this issue nationally instead of just doing a piecemeal ruling. It also avoids the criticism that one of these cases, a single case, is a wrong vehicle, but now the court could potentially address several questions at the same time. Are AR-15s protected arms? Are magazine bans constitutional? And can states ban commonly owned firearms? And a new decision like this one that came out in Benson, along with the pending cases in other circuit courts, may help to shape that landscape even further. So where does this leave us right now when it comes to the magazine ban issue and the rifle ban issue and the cases pending in front of the Supreme Court? So like I said, right now you have the Vermontes and Duncan case that were relisted once again. You have that brand new ruling striking down magazine bans in that Washington, D.C. area in the Benson ruling, and multiple rifle and magazine ban challenges that are moving through the courts. And they're all centered around the same constitutional question. If the court ultimately grants review to one of these cases, we would finally get a definitive ruling on rifle bans and magazine bans nationwide. So now we will be looking at the docket once again this week to see what happens. There are several possibilities about potentially how this could play out or what the Supreme Court is doing. One could be that the Supreme Court holds these cases for, maybe a while to see how the DC case procedurally responds and, how, it develops, if they decide to go en banc or if DC decides to seek Supreme Court review. So one of the things the Supreme Court could do is just delay the Vermontes and Duncan case to see how does the DC case develop. Also, they could be simply waiting to see how the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which heard, that issue en banc dealing with New Jersey's rifle ban and magazine ban, how did they respond to this new DC ruling? There is a strong chance, in my opinion, that the Third Circuit en banc panel may rule to strike down rifle and magazine bans in New Jersey, and that DC ruling that we just got in Benson may play a role in that new ruling. Because of this, the Supreme Court may now wait a little bit longer to allow these decisions in other cases and new rulings like Benson to further develop, and essentially see how this legal landscape shakes out after that ruling. So we will now have to wait to see, how do the Supreme Court justices respond and what do they decide to do. So that's where things currently stand right now in the rifle and magazine ban cases. But I would say I'm more optimistic now this week than I was prior because of what just happened in Benson. And I think that is going to impact some of these cases going forward and also may persuade the Supreme Court to finally step in. So as things develop, as we get more information, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those things help to fuel the algorithm and just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this type of two-way content, and so it shares it to more people. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.